Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, November the 13th, 2024. Today I want to talk about the economy. I know that I'd kind of suggested that I might want to stay clear of politics for a little bit. And, I want to talk about economics, not politics. So you could say that economics and politics are very much connected. But, we do have a new president. We're about to get a new president. And that is going to have economic implications, I think. Or perhaps it was inevitable anyway. But, we might expect a particular economic environment between now and the end of the decade. And I know a lot of people are really gloomy about the economy, thinking that it's inevitable that things are just going to collapse and it's only a matter of time. But I'm starting to wonder, maybe the economy short term is going to be okay. I mean, at least from a US perspective. And when I talk about the short term, I'm perhaps thinking the next few years, perhaps through the Trump presidency. Not necessarily because of Trump. It just may have been the way anyway. And so I want to look very, very briefly in an exploratory way at the period, say, between now and 2030. And I'm just going to put up some ideas. I'm not making any cast-down forecasts here. I just want to look at an approach which perhaps suggests that, the economy is going to be okay. And looking at it historically, there are perhaps grounds for this. Now, when I say the economy is going to be okay, I mean okay perhaps if you're rich. If you've got money, you may be able to sort of get more money. And maybe it's going to be a very unfair society. But I don't know. I think there are good grounds, for example, for thinking that the Republicans are again going to win the 2028 election. And I want to make a sort of a comparison perhaps between now and the 1920s. And I mean, it's not a complete fit, but perhaps there are some parallels. Anyway, before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, November the 13th. Usual reminder, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, by pressing the like button or whatever you have to do to indicate that you like the video. And if you're not subscribed, I would be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe, because I need all the subscribers I can get. And what am I on? 7,500 subscribers, something like that. But still, getting to 10,000 subscribers would be nice. Nice to get there by the end of the year, but there isn't really much left of the year, so I'm probably not going to make it. Not going to make five figures by the end of 2024. But still, hope springs forth eternal, as they say. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today. Now, in general, there's not a lot going on today, so I'm expecting my forecast, for example, for the 12 signs to be briefer than usual. But anyway, as far as what we've got, this is as usual, November the 13th, noon, set for New York. We've got the moon at 2117 Aries. So pretty close to my lunar return. Yeah, I think my moon is at around 22 something Aries. So my lunar return is today. That's nice. This lunar return, I'm not talking about me. My apologies. I'm not the one that matters. The moon is at 21 Aries, and we can say the usual stuff about moon in Aries. It's in a fire sign. It's quite assertive. It's action orientated. And it's a chance for us perhaps to make things happen, and that might be something that we want to do. And Also, we've got the moon making some aspects of note. We've got the moon making a conjunction to Chiron. Moon conjunct Chiron, and sort of moon in the same house, as same sign as the North Node. So with moon conjunct Chiron, it's not just about taking the initiative, is it? It's about doing something perhaps different, if you take the view that Chiron is the maverick. Okay, you might go on about Chiron the wounded healer, but I mean, Chiron is the maverick, and perhaps we need to do something which is different, which is not expected, which is a fundamental expression of our individuality. I mean, after all, Moon in Aries is about leading rather than following. It's about taking the initiative. It's about acting rather than reacting. And so if we want to do things differently with the Moon conjunct Chiron, perhaps this is now our chance. And perhaps this is something we should be doing. Is it a time to follow? No, I don't think so, by and large. And the Moon in Aries is making a sextile to Jupiter. There you can see Moon sextile Jupiter is a nice aspect. It's fortunate. It's optimistic, and there's also a trine relationship between the Moon and Mercury. So that might be more at the beginning of the day, but still, you've got Mercury in Sagittarius, Moon in Aries. So our thoughts and actions seem to be connected. And yes, I think, for many of us, it can be a fortunate day when we can really sort of make things happen. So essentially, that is it. I mean, those are the main aspects today. Now, there are a couple of midpoints perhaps that are worthy of note. We have Saturn aspecting the Uranus Aries point exactly. So that is a somewhat obscure midpoint, at least on the surface, but I suppose the principle of Uranus Aries as a pair. So, by the way, if you want to see this Uranus Aries midpoint, so here is the Aries point, which it's the world point. That might be how we might want to see it, and there's Uranus. So we're talking about a point about here, and Saturn is here. So Saturn is 45 degrees from the Uranus Aries point. So Uranus Aries point is about the world, and Uranus Aries is about perhaps the surprises and shocks and dramas that the world can provide. And with Saturn on the Uranus Aries point, some of us may feel overwhelmed by what is happening in the world. We may feel that it's all very dramatic, but we don't really have much control. So, to an extent, that might depend where you live. I understand that if you're watching this and you're upset that Trump won the election, you might be looking at Trump's cabinet picks with despair. Perhaps, that might be a feature of Saturn on the Uranus Aries midpoint, or it just might be about things happening in the world. The world just doesn't seem very, very stable, and it seems to affect you. Maybe not directly, but it still affects you because you're aware of it. So that is a way in which Saturn on the Uranus Aries point could work. And another aspect another midpoint aspect we've got is Sun aspecting the Mercury-Pluto midpoint. Mercury-Pluto is perhaps the principle of persuasion, powerful ideas, trying to get people to accept our powerful ideas. And it's all very much tied up with our identity. Now, that might be one way of looking at it. But with this kind of aspect, there's also the alternative view that it could be about powerful people trying to push their ideas onto us. And so we have to be very aware today, perhaps, of the flow of ideas. who's trying to persuade who to do what, and who is being persuasive and charismatic and using clever words. So that's something that we do perhaps need to think about. Now, this chart here is set for New York, noon New York, and the moon is at 21 Aries. So if we set that chart for Sydney, Australia, of course we now have daylight saving time. One of the commenters just reminded me that Australia now has daylight saving time because it is the summer. I don't know when the clocks went forward in Australia. Did they just go forward? But anyway, they are forward now. So it was suggested to me that I got my video out an hour earlier so that some Australians can watch this with their breakfast. I'll see what I can do to oblige. It all depends, doesn't it? Anyway, that's noon. That's noon in Sydney, Australia, and the moon is still in Aries, but the moon is slightly earlier in Aries. Moon is at 11 degrees Aries. So, in terms of Australia, perhaps the main aspect will be that moon trine Australia, New Zealand. The moon trine Mercury will perhaps be more important than the moon sextile Jupiter. So moon trine Mercury is about communication. Things need to be said with moon trine Mercury. The two communication planets. Moon communicates with its heart. Mercury communicates with the mind, but the heart and the mind are at one with each other, and they're able to express each other very well. At least they can do, if they want to do. So yeah, there's a slight difference in emphasis in Australia and New Zealand, but I wouldn't have said it was a major difference. And as far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, this is the heliocentric chart. And let's hold on. Let's just change the coordinates. I didn't actually look at this beforehand, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be seeing. Okay, so there's Mercury, and there is the Earth. You can see that Mercury and Earth are exactly square each other from a heliocentric view. So with that Earth Mercury square, I mean, it's a square, so that might be about difficult communications, people trying to get their message across, but it's not always easy because it's a square. But the message always matters with the Earth square Mercury, and perhaps it's fortunate then that geocentrically we've got moon trine Mercury, so that moon trine Mercury might be able to facilitate communication in an environment which in some respects is difficult for communication. So how you get that message across may actually be quite important. And I don't think there's anything else to report of major significance heliocentrically. So I will now just turn to my forecast for the 12 signs, and I do expect these forecasts for the 12 signs to be briefer than usual. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, November the 13th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you are in the center of things, or at least you should be in the center of things. The moon is most certainly in your sign, and the moon is making a conjunction to Chiron, it's making a trine to Mercury, it's making a sextile to Jupiter. So I do think that things are flowing really nicely, and I don't think there's much excuse for saying, well, you can't do things, there's no opportunity, you need to hold back. No, I think you have the capacity now to be yourself and to make things happen, and perhaps to take the initiative. you are someone who naturally likes to be an actor. I mean, actor as in someone who acts rather than a responder. So what is it that you want to start? It is time. And you should not be too concerned about, I don't know, social norms, what people like, what people expect. That's not your job. Your job is perhaps to maybe even shock people a bit, surprise them. I mean, that is Moon conjunct Chiron. Moon conjunct Chiron can be about doing the last thing that people expect and demonstrating that you really are a unique individual, because you are. But sometimes you might think that society doesn't appreciate unique individuals. There's a certain sameness that is expected in society. I mean, I suppose that depends where you are. I mean, some societies are more tolerant of individuality than others. So, Aries, you do have to think about what kind of society you're living in. But if you have the opportunity to take the initiative, then I would have said that you really need to go for it. And it's not just because of yourself. This is not anything selfish. It's about doing what is right, and right not just for yourself but for other people. Some people are not as happy as they should be. They perhaps have complaints, and maybe they've been treated badly. In which case, Aries, you're just the person to step in and perhaps create some improvements, or perhaps shock other people into making improvements. And at the same time, Aries, I don't think that you're afraid of dealing with things that just other people don't want to touch. You're brave, I think. I mean, I think that you have a certain amount of courage. Now, I'm not going to encourage you to do anything that is dangerous, but you're prepared to tackle issues which other people just are not prepared to touch, and perhaps to talk about them as well. You can see what is wrong with the world in which you're living, and you can see that some of the people around you are not behaving right and are not being constructive. And so it's a time, Aries, to be yourself, and perhaps to be a full, complete Aries in terms of taking the initiative, making things happen. And don't forget, Moon is also sextile Jupiter. Moon sextile Jupiter, Moon in Aries, sextile Jupiter in Gemini. I do think that makes you, more fortunate than usual. And I think that the way you come over, it will get people's attention. Some people might not like it at first, but if you keep going, I think that people will start to see you in a new and more positive light, and they will eventually understand that, whatever you want to do, whatever you feel is important, that you are in the right. Taurus, you don't have to be everywhere at once. That is really not necessary. You don't have to be the initiator. You don't, even if you've got plans which are very important to you, things that you really, want to do, you want to get going on, you don't have to do it right now. There shouldn't be any pressure. You have to, or you don't. There's no have to in this. You can work things out at your own pace. And to be honest, Taurus, there are some things which are probably best just kept to yourself. No one needs to know about them, and you can, at the same time, live with a certain amount of confusion. I know that confusion is a word that is often has negative connotations. But I don't think confusion needs to be a bad concept. In fact, I think that today you can actually benefit from a certain amount of confusion. Confusion is about not making decisions. It's about not reaching conclusions. It's just accepting things as they are and accepting the fact that it is a complicated world and you can't label this world, at least you can't at the moment, and that's what confusion means. So just go with the confusion. I think that confusion only becomes a problem if you feel that you have to make decisions. You have to draw conclusions. Because if you're in a confusing environment and you make decisions or draw conclusions, there's a good chance that your conclusions are going to be wrong, and wrong perhaps across the board. So just accept things as they are. I mean, you don't have to actually even accept them, because if you accept something, that suggests a certain sense of finality, and this is not a time for finality. This is a time for just letting things just happen and not making it personal. And that way the tide can just wash over you and you'll be fine. And in your own way, if you take a sort of a happy-go-lucky approach and you don't make decisions, you don't reach conclusions, in a strange way that you'll be attracting a certain amount of luck, and this luck could take many forms, and it may actually be financial luck. I mean, I think that is possible, but somewhere in the confusion, in the chaos, an opportunity may just show up that may have financial implications, and maybe you can take advantage of it. But I don't want to get your hopes up, but I just do think that is a possibility. Now, as far as other people are concerned, this is a situation which is especially confusing. It's going to be very difficult to understand people, to understand their motives, to understand what they're trying to do. And I would have said, just don't try. And I suppose it may be about, particularly if you're dealing with people you've never met before, assume the worst but expect the best. There are going to be people who are just not going to be clear about what they want, what their motives are, what their intentions are. It's not a time to be gullible. Certainly do not accept people at face value. They can say all sorts of things, but they might be lying. They might be lying to themselves, but it may be fine. Maybe they are absolutely reliable, and sooner or later they'll prove their worth. But you don't have to put anything to the test. So overall, Taurus, I just think it's in a day when you should live with a certain amount of ambiguity and not reach conclusions, not feel pressurized to make decisions. And in that way, I think you'll be able to get through. And once this brief period of confusion is over, I think that things will resolve quite quickly. And don't forget, quite soon the moon moves into Taurus, your sign, and that, of course, I think that happens tomorrow. So that is perhaps something to look forward to. Gemini, I think, Gemini, that you're in quite a gregarious mood. I think you seem to be in many ways quite positive, and I think that it's a time when you can enjoy other people's company, and if you want to see what other people are doing, you might be pleasantly surprised, and don't feel that you have to be totally original. I mean, originality can be important to Geminis. They want to do things which are different, which sort of marks them out. as someone special, but you don't have to be too special today. You can perhaps, find out what other people are doing. Other people do matter. Other people have got something to offer. So try to give them a chance. And this is the right thing for you to be doing, I think. Emotionally, when you're with other people, you will feel, I think, sort of quite good. And the moon is, moon is in Aries. The moon is making a sextile to making a trine to Mercury. So that trine to Mercury, okay, that might be more about the beginning of the day. Could be particularly strong if you're in Australia and New Zealand. Perhaps less important in the Americas, but I still think that wherever you are, you're going to feel that trine between Moon and Mercury is going to sort of help you communicate. I think it's going to help you to understand other people, understand other people's needs, and be able to listen to them. And it is a time for listening. Don't feel that you have to bring your own material to the table. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't get hung up on yourself. That doesn't mean to say that you have to be selfless, put your own interest last. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more about seeing, what the world has got to offer, and also perhaps thinking about, your hopes and your wishes. And that is something quite fundamental. There is today, and there's today, whatever your plans are for today, and what your hopes are for today, and your ambitions for today. But what if we take it forward? We think about, what would you like to be doing in the future? In hopes and wishes, what do you wish for? What do you hope for? How would you like things to be? And as a Gemini, these kind of questions can sometimes be forgotten, and you don't like to think too much about the future. I don't know, with the future. I mean, Geminis have an issue with the future. Geminis can actually be obsessed about the future, but at the same time, Geminis of all signs, they don't like the passing of years, really. Not really. I think Geminis, they can be a sign that they're sort of thinking about eternal youth, and I don't know, Puer Eternus, the Puella, what is it? Puella Eterna, is it? I don't know. They can be thinking about that, but it's okay to think about the future. It may be a good time to think about the future. And as I said, I don't mean that in a practical sense, in a practical material sense. It's more about what you would like to be doing in the future. Where is it all going from a spiritual sense? You're here on this planet for a reason, and we all are. And what do you think the reason is? What's the reason going to be in, say, 10 years, for example? And so do try to think about the future today, and do listen to what other people have to say as well, because you may get insights about the future and about what you really want, what you fundamentally want in the core of your being. You might get ideas about that by interacting with society in a friendly way, and not feeling that you have to talk too much. In a way, you should let other people talk, let other people discuss their ideas, and see where it takes you. Cancer, moon continues to be in Aries. The moon is trine Jupiter, and I think that that moon trine Jupiter, I would have said, is pretty fortunate. It makes you, I would have said, luckier than average. And, luck can take many forms, and luck is not necessarily going to be where you expect it. And if you want to be lucky, you may perhaps have to go slightly off the beaten track. So you don't have to be in any one place. And by looking at things in a slightly different way, and also following you can find that luck. It's also going to be important to follow your instincts. And as a Cancerian, you have powerful instincts. They're not anything that has to be verbalized, but if you follow your instincts, you may find something that really works, and it may be a little bit unexpected. And also, today, the moon is in Aries, and it's making a conjunction to Chiron. So moon, makes a conjunction to Chiron quite regularly, but this moon conjunct Chiron, may encourage you to perhaps express yourself in ways that are slightly unusual. It's not a time for just following the crowd. It's a time for being an individual and not keeping your individuality secret. I mean, it's easiest to be an individual when no one's looking, when no one notices. It's perhaps more difficult to be an individual when you're in the spotlight. And to an extent today, you might find yourself in the spotlight. So if you try to do things differently, and you try to do things in a way that is, very unique, that might be noticed, and it might be commented on. And I suppose there's always a danger that, you might be rather self-conscious about it. You might be worried about what people are thinking, concerned that they might have sort of negative thoughts about you. You might be a little bit afraid of criticism, or you just may be afraid that you're revealing something about yourself. But don't let these fears get you down. It is a time to show the world who you are, and to show the world that you are someone who is really very unique, and you can be different, and maybe in your own way you can be a bit of a revolutionary. And also, I think the overall message you're delivering, and it's not just a message, it's just something in your aura, even kind of the vibes you're emanating, is that it's not just about you. It's not just about you selfishly wanting to be the initiator. You're doing it because it's for a reason, and there may be a moral dimension to it. Cancerians can be very moral. Cancerians can have a strong sense of right and wrong, and they can be quite unforgiving of people who break that moral code. And so, in terms of what you're emanating, there is an underlying morality, an underlying sense of right and wrong, and also a sense that you are in the right, and that what you think is important is something that other people should be thinking is important as well. And so I think you've got it right. And I therefore think that it's a time when you shouldn't be shy. Leo, I mentioned yesterday, I think, that you could be, in your own way, quite persuasive, and I repeat that. I think the things you say, the things you do, the words you use, it can get people's attention. And if there's anything that you feel is important, that you want people to do, you want people to notice, then I think you can make it happen. And in your own way, you can actually be very, very persuasive. Now, that persuasiveness may actually be quite subtle. It's not like that you have to bark orders, tell people what to do, tell people what to think. You just need to sort of listen to your feelings, work in a way that may be a little bit behind the scenes, but by doing that, you can slowly but surely make things move your way. And, remember, you are really in a strong position. I mean, the Sun is in Scorpio, Mars is in Leo. They are in mutual reception with each other. This is a situation that continues for the next 10 days until around November the 22nd. So do take advantage of it. And do take advantage of your fundamental persuasiveness. And don't assume that just because someone believes something and is absolutely sure of themselves, that they can't change their mind. And you can make them change their mind. I mean, if it's important, you don't want to try to change people's minds for the sake of it. But if it's important to you that you get support, that people follow your message and understand your message, then I think now is perhaps the time to do it. And aside from the communication aspect, it's you're capable at the moment of deep thinking, and you can really get down to the things that really matter, the fundamental things that are important, and that actually can be quite elevating. And it is a time when you can be elevated. And we've got the moon in Aries, a fire sign. You're a fire sign. That's nice. We've got the moon making a sextile to Jupiter. And so that, to my mind, does talk about elevation, seeing things around you that make you confident that, however difficult things may be in the short term, things are getting better and things can get better. And, okay, part of it might be that you can benefit from having the right people around you. That is a possibility. Making sure that you hang out with people who are on your wavelength. Or also there's a sense in which you may have to think a little bit about the future. Someone might be right for you now, but what about the future? Certain people may have been unimportant at the moment, not relevant. They may not seem relevant, but they could be relevant very soon. So in terms of your social life, do try to be as open-minded as possible, because certain people may become very useful in the near future, and if you can start to cultivate them now, I think that would be a good thing to do. Virgo, things are perhaps at the moment a little bit serious. You understand that the world we're living in is not straightforward, it's not easy, it's not simple, and it's a good idea to take this world as as seriously as possible, and to, if you can, sort of get involved in some sort of deep thinking, and also to realize to realize that there are certain things that interfere with your concentration, and they're trivial, they're not needed. And so perhaps, Virgo, if you can be more focused and make a decision about what is important, and perhaps stick to that decision, and in your own way you might then have to be assertive. Make it clear that there are certain things that you don't need and you don't want, and it's not a time, for example, for just saying yes for the sake of it, just to make people happy. That's not what it's about. It's about realizing that perhaps everything has implications. So you might say yes to something, you might agree to something, and very soon you'll realize that you got yourself into something complicated. So invitations should be delayed or turned down on balance. It depends on the situation. Some invitations have to be accepted, but ideally you should not be committing yourself. I don't think that's necessary, and instead, you need to work out what things mean, and it just may take you a little bit of time to work out what they mean. But you are very perceptive, Virgo, today, and you can make connections very quickly. I think sort of quicker than usual, and I think you may have a subtle sense of your own self-interest. You may just get a feel for what's important to you, and you can slowly work it out. And so this means, Virgo, that if you're, for example, doing a job, you've got a business, you're doing something that requires you to be pushing an agenda, whatever that might be, you get a sense of where you should be going, what you should be doing, and what is in your best interests. And that is because we have a sextile between the Moon and Jupiter, and that Moon Jupiter sextile is actually very perceptive, and you just have a feeling that some things are good for you, some things are bad for you, and I suppose it is about your own selfish interests. And remember, Jupiter is in mutual reception with Mercury, because Jupiter and Mercury are in each other's signs. Jupiter's in Gemini, Mercury's in Sagittarius. So Virgo, if you feel that something is important, that something is going to be useful, and if you feel that something is in your interests, then just go for it. And you don't have to explain and apologize. And I suppose you could argue that if you act in your own interests, then in the end you'll be acting in other people's interests as well. But the first thing you have to do is just make sure that everything is in order, make sure that you've secured your advantage, and then you can worry about other people. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, this Moon sextile Jupiter may actually be quite useful. The Moon is in Aries. That suggests to me that you are a serious and intense person at the moment who is very clear about their feelings, what they like, what they don't like, and you will react quickly in terms of I suppose your likes and dislikes in terms of other people. And so with this intensity and seriousness, and the Moon making that sextile to Jupiter, that may allow you to strengthen certain relationships in your life, and certain relationships may become very serious and focused, and it may be clear that you and another person are going in the same direction. Now, you may not be going in the same direction forever, but for the moment, there is a certain sense of common purpose that can be found. I mean, it's not going to be like common purpose with everyone, but perhaps with the people that matter, you can find common purpose, at least in the short term, and that could mean that you're dealing with a day where there is a certain sense of a satisfaction that perhaps you and another person have found each other and are able to communicate with each other, for whatever reason. It needn't be about romance. It can be just about a purpose, something you have a shared set of goals with another person, and that's something that perhaps you need to think about. Libra, it may be a little difficult today to be completely independent, because you are aware of the pressures around you. Perhaps you're being pressurized to do things. People have expectations of you, and I suppose you could say that the easiest option is to just accept things, to follow the crowd perhaps, and make a special effort not to disappoint people. However, you do have to be a bit careful. You have to think about whether this is really the right approach. Just because people are persuasive, and some people are very persuasive, just because that is the case doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow the line of least resistance. I mean, there are people out there who don't really know what they're doing, but they kind of claim to know what they're doing. And that means that there's a danger that if you spend your time following other people's suggestions, you could get absolutely nowhere, or even worse than nowhere. So I think it is actually quite important that you think about yourself, but you think about yourself within a social environment. You can't avoid the fact that you live in a social world, but at the same time you have to understand the problems that living in a social world actually brings. And it may then be the case, Libra, that over the course of the day you need to make an effort to assert your independence. You don't have to assert your independence in an obnoxious way, but just enough so that people know that you are serious and that you're not someone who can be taken for granted. And at the same time, we have to remember that Venus is now moving into Capricorn. Venus has moved out of Sagittarius, and it is moving into Capricorn, and that does say something about what your overall stance should be. Between now and, I don't know, when is it? December the 7th, I think. Moon moves out of Capricorn into Aquarius. That while Venus is moving in through Capricorn, you have to consider what makes you comfortable, what makes you stable. And what can be destabilizing is other people and the pressures they try to put on you. And today, I think those pressures could be particularly intense. And part of the problem is one of vagueness. People are there, they want attention, they're making demands, but still there's something quite vague and nebulous about them. And you don't quite know what they want. It's not clear. So I would have said, Libra, that you need to be a little careful in terms of making commitments. And certainly it's not a time for taking people seriously. They can say what they like, but you don't have to necessarily worry about it or feel that you have to oblige them. And at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily a time for getting particularly close to people. I mean, it's always nice to get close to people, isn't it? I don't know, maybe not. And as a Libra, I understand that you regard relationships as being important, but people have their own issues. And, when you get very close to someone at the moment, you might find that the kind of issues that they're dealing with are not anything that you actually want to deal with. Some people are making things more complicated than they should be. Some people are obsessed with things that you're not interested in. And so, Libra, you have to accept that other people matter. You have to accept that other people's influence cannot be avoided. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you look after yourself, because it's you that matters. And especially with Venus in Capricorn moving through Capricorn now, over the next couple of weeks, your your main priority should be security, and I think it's something you can find. It is available, and now's the time to make it clear to the world who you are and who you're not, and what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and your individuality matters. And once everyone understands that your individuality matters, then everything is going to be straightforward. Scorpio, you know that things don't happen all by themselves, that something has to make them happen. Someone has to, well, I suppose, do the work. And right now, Scorpio, it might feel that it's all down to you. And I think that many Scorpios will indeed be feeling a certain sense of responsibility, that if you don't do something, then no one else will. But I don't think that you should be resenting this responsibility, because if you're the one doing things, if you're the one making things happen, then you have control. If you get help from another person, or if you share responsibilities, in a way you could say that you're losing power, because you then are not able to fully predict how it's going to happen, and how things are going to work out. But when you're doing it all, then it's all happening on your terms. So I would have said, don't be afraid of going the extra mile. Don't be afraid of doing things on your own without anyone's help. Indeed, maybe without anyone's knowledge. You work away at something, and you're doing something important, and having done all this work, no one seems to know you've done anything. They don't even notice, and that might sound not nice, that people don't appreciate what you're doing. But if people don't appreciate if people don't know what you're doing, if they don't notice what you're doing, that gives you a special strength. So other people may, to an extent today, be something of an optional extra. Also, Scorpio, you have the capacity to really get down to the absolute depths of things. You're prepared to consider things that other people wouldn't touch. You're prepared to just go deep, deal with things that may be very unpleasant. I mean, unpleasant perhaps to other people, but maybe not unpleasant to you, because I think as a Scorpio, you understand the meaning of the word unpleasantness, and you perhaps realize that unpleasantness is part of life's experience. Life is unpleasant, or at least, I'm not saying that life is unpleasant in general. I'm just saying that there are aspects of life that are unpleasant, and that cannot be avoided. And I think that at the moment, Scorpio, you seem to be quite realistic about it. And it might be a case also that what do they say? Where there's muck, there's brass. Is that a phrase that they say in Yorkshire? Is it? Where you go, where there are things that are unpleasant, that's where the money is. That's where the benefits are. That's where the advantages are. So digging through the mud is where you find the advantage, where you find the brass. And perhaps with Moon sextile Jupiter today, which is quite a lucky sextile, it may be that by going deep into things, by addressing things that are difficult and unpleasant, there might be a sudden change, a sudden turn, and you actually see that what actually seemed not very nice, even slightly disgusting, may actually be to your advantage. And I suppose it's only a Scorpio that can work at that level. So Scorpio, it can be a complicated day, but you're able to think deeply about what is going on, and in terms of ambition and getting what you want, I think that your ability to be very perceptive and to think things that other people wouldn't think, can't think, that does give you an advantage. Sagittarius, it should be a nice day. I mean, after all, we've got the moon moving through Aries, which is a nice place for the moon to be moving if you are a Sagittarius. And the moon moving through Aries, it makes a pleasant sextile aspect to Jupiter, and so that should really allow things to sort of run smoothly. And I think that you can probably benefit from other people. Other people are not putting too much pressure on you, but they are available if need be. And I think that there are opportunities to, I think, enjoy people's company and to benefit from other people's insights. But make sure that you get the balance right. Yes, other people are there for you. You can enjoy. Yes, other people's company can be fun, but don't forget your own key and core individuality, especially today when we have got the moon making a conjunction to Chiron. And in terms of this moon conjunct Chiron aspect, I'm kind of thinking that it's not necessarily about the usual stuff about the wounded healer. I'm thinking that one should perhaps more focus on the maverick aspect of Chiron, doing things that are different, really demonstrating your individuality, and just not being too afraid about the impact you're having. And I think that with the moon making a conjunction to Chiron Sagittarius, I think it's asking that you are very clear about what makes you special, and not being afraid of your own creative genius. And if that means causing a bit of a fuss, getting attention that may not always be fortunate. Not everyone's going to like what you do, what you present, and I don't think it's a time when you should moderate your message. You've got a message, it's strong, it's very individual, and it's you and who you are really cannot be compromised. But with the moon sextile Jupiter, I think anyone that is worth bothering is going to appreciate. Let me say it again. Anyone that is worth bothering with is going to appreciate you. If someone doesn't appreciate you, then they're not worth bothering with. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? And so I think that moon sextile Jupiter can actually be extremely useful, and I think that you can get support and appreciation, and through that support and appreciation you can take things further. You can actually push who you are and what you can do well. You can push it to new heights. So maybe Sagittarius, it's a time when you have to be ambitious in a creative sense, because you've got so much to offer, and I don't think it's a time when you should be holding back. Capricorn, Venus continues to move through your sign. It's now very well established in Capricorn, and just a reminder that with Venus moving through Capricorn, it does make you a fairly pleasant person. You can be a pleasant person if you want to be a pleasant person, and you know how to make people happy. You also know how to make people unhappy, but so you understand what it takes to change the social dynamic. But I think in most cases, your solid, down-to-earth approach is going to be appreciated, and it's going to be easy to sort of go through life, go through whatever the day's business is, and just come over in an attractive way, which I think people will appreciate. Yet, I don't want to give the impression that everything is calm. I said right at the beginning of this piece that Saturn is semi-square the Uranus-Aries midpoint. It's exactly semi-square the Uranus-Aries midpoint today. And Saturn is your ruler. And so if Saturn is square the Uranus-Aries midpoint, I think that Uranus-Aries midpoint may say something about your experience of the day. And, not just today. I mean, this is relatively slow moving, this Saturn being on the Uranus-Aries midpoint. And it just may be a sense, Capricorn, that there are things going on which are big, which are going to have an impact on all of us. And it's about the world in which we're living, and you know that everything matters. You know that everything is connected, and you might take the view that a drama in one part of the world is going to affect another part of the world, and this applies more so to, for example, to the country in which you're living in. You're perhaps more aware of the instability in your own country, or I don't know, your own state or your region, and that really does matter, and it does have an impact. And we shouldn't forget also that Saturn, your ruler, is slowing down. Saturn is about to go stationary direct, and it's almost there. So Saturn is really slow. It's coming to a standstill. And I'll be talking in detail about Saturn going stationary direct in a day or two. But with Saturn going stationary direct, semi-square the Uranus-Aries midpoint, there is nothing trivial about anything. And it is a time perhaps when you are pausing and when you are thinking and you are realizing, and you realize that things aren't necessarily as they should be. But this is the world in which you live, and I think that as a Capricorn, that is certainly something you understand. And also as a Capricorn, you understand what you need to be doing. And today is a day when I think you're going to be very good at preparing. Perhaps you feel that something, you have to prepare yourself for something. You may be very clear about what you're preparing yourself for. You may not quite so clear, but you just have a certain sense of unease. But again, I'm not talking about anything personal. I just think you understand the way the world is going. And today, with the moon sextile Jupiter, I think that you're not overwhelmed by anything. You understand that there are things that can be done, and you know that however bad things are going to be, if you do if you take the right action, it's not going to affect you. It might affect other people who perhaps don't have your level of awareness, but I suppose you can think about your own future, and you can think about how outside events can impact you, and you can make the necessary preparations. And I'm not saying all of this to suggest that it's a bad day. I don't think it is a bad day. Actually, I think it's a day when you're grounded, you're sensible, you understand your responsibilities, and you're realistic. Other people are not realistic, but you are realistic, and I suppose that's the great thing about being a Capricorn. You are grounded, and you're not going to be surprised by sudden events, because in a way these sudden events, you already anticipated them. Aquarius, I don't know whether you were listening to what I was saying about Capricorn, saying what I was saying about Capricorn, but some of that message holds true for you as well. And so what I was saying to Capricorn was that Saturn is making a semi-square aspect to the Uranus-Aries midpoint. That might just sound a little bit obscure, but that aspect is exact today. And the Uranus-Aries pairing is about the world, and it's about the dramas of the world. And so at some level, Aquarius, you are aware of the dramas unfolding on this planet in which you live. And also remember that heliocentrically we have got a square aspect between Mercury and Earth at the moment. So Mercury, we could see Mercury as being about awareness, about perhaps being aware of what is happening on our planet or on our little part of the planet. And so not everyone takes advantage of that Mercury square the Earth, but I think you can take advantage of it. And you can ask the right questions, and you can get the answers you're looking for. And when you look at what the answers are, there's perhaps indications that things are not 100% perfect. But I think that if you're aware of all of this, it just gives you an advantage, and you can perhaps take steps to protect yourself. And I suppose we have to accept that in your case, Saturn is in Pisces, and so with Saturn in Pisces, that can have financial implications. So it may be that from a financial position, you can see a bit of trouble on the horizon, but maybe you can do something to prepare yourself for that trouble, so that when trouble actually comes, you're completely protected from it. I should emphasize, though, that I'm not giving any financial advice here. This video is for entertainment purposes only, of course, but still, there might be a certain sense in which financial preparation could be quite useful. And also, Aquarius, do think about your own special abilities. Your own special abilities can make up for a lot. So if things go wrong in one area, then you can quickly cover it, because you've got the ability to deal with it, and you've got the ability to compensate. And I think that you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is making a sextile to Jupiter. I mean, it's a very nice sextile, nice aspect. Moon in Aries, sextile Jupiter in Gemini, and this is a time when, Aquarius, you can be, I think, very open about your thoughts. In fact, super open if you want to be. And there may even be a certain sense of drama about you. A drama that gets you noticed. And it's not just about making people afraid, telling people things they don't want to hear. it's also about telling people who you are and what you can do. And it's possible in some cases that Aquarians might have an opportunity to go somewhere, to take a short journey, and you take this short journey because perhaps you see an opportunity, and you go somewhere and you tell everyone who you are and what you can do, and they might be impressed. So it may be that a short journey, can perhaps bring you some luck that maybe you weren't expecting. Pisces, you may continue to be a little bit concerned about money. It's simply because moon is in Aries, and so when the moon is in Aries, if you're a Pisces, this can be a time when financial issues come to the surface, but not necessarily in a way that is negative. I mean, the moon is in Aries, but it is sextile Jupiter and trine Mercury, so the moon is actually quite well placed from a financial perspective. So this might be, Pisces, a time when you can actually do things to improve your financial situation, do something perhaps a little bit surprising. And if money is being held back, or you feel that money is owed to you, then it's possible that doing something a little bit unexpected may be the way to break the deadlock. And that is because the moon is making a conjunction to Chiron. And so with the moon conjunct the Chiron, that indicates doing something unexpected, unusual, doing something that is sort of outside the box, and you can perhaps wrong foot people, and they don't know what to do, and you seem to know everything, you seem to know what's happening, no one else knows what's happening, and perhaps out of this chaos, which in a way you have created yourself, you may be able to take advantage of it, perhaps in a financial sense. Of course, there is a moral dimension to it. Make sure you're talking about money that really is owed to you. You don't want to just take advantage of other people's confusion to take money from them. That's not what I'm suggesting. So yeah, be moral about it, but I think you can do stuff that gives you the financial advantage, and maybe that could relate to work. If you're working, or you have your own business, you can just perhaps take advantage of a situation that no one understands except for you. So that may be one aspect of the day. Also, the moon is making a sextile to Jupiter, and it's making a trine to Mercury. And that moon sextile Jupiter, money aside, it just is generally fortunate. I think that you're going to feel good about yourself, and when you look at what you have and what you don't have, you may feel that you've got enough. You may feel that you've got enough to do the things that you want to do, and that you've got enough to make yourself feel comfortable. And when we're talking about what you have, we're not necessarily just talking about money. We could also be talking about some of your abilities, and some of your abilities are really starting to come to the surface, abilities that maybe you've forgotten about, but actually these abilities are completely fresh and are completely appropriate, and that they can be useful right now. So Pisces, it's just very important that you don't doubt yourself. You have things which allow you to make sense of the world, and also to prosper in this world. So in that sense, Pisces, I think it looks like being quite a constructive day. And so I think, by the end of the day, there's no reason why you can't have achieved a great deal. Okay, you might not have achieved everything, but one day is just a beginning, and over the next couple of days you can perhaps see your advantage through. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 56, which is the Wanderer. And the Wanderer can be a slightly problematic hexagram, and we have had it quite recently. And the Wanderer represents someone who is in a strange land. They're not familiar with the territory, and fundamentally they don't have a home. So you have to consider how this relates to you. There may just be one aspect of your activities where you don't know what's going on, where you are completely at sea. Maybe you're involved with something you've never done before and you're still learning, or you're still very reliant on other people. Of course, it may be that you are literally a wanderer. Maybe you've just moved to a different location and you're still getting to grips with things. So this hexagram, sure, it can be dangerous, because as a wanderer, we have to behave in a particular way. We can't take anything for granted, and we are reliant on other people. We are perhaps, reliant on our hosts, or, if we're visiting a new country, a new culture, we don't know the rules. We have nothing, we only have what's on our back. That's the metaphor to think about. That's all we have. And we do have 4 moving lines here. So we have a lot of moving lines. 4 is quite a bit. And the bottom line moves. And with the bottom line moving, there is a suggestion that we've got ourselves into a new activity. Or perhaps we've moved to a new country, or maybe we are travelling. But we're involved in a new activity, and we don't actually have enough resources. Perhaps we've not packed enough, and we have not necessarily got enough resources to see it through. And so we have to be very, very careful. We can't make light of things because of our situation. And so our economy, our money is going to be important, and so we have to tread extremely carefully. And then the second line moves. So the second line moves. Now that's not so bad. The second line moves that suggests that after a while there will be some support. We're not entirely alone. So perhaps we're dealing with a situation where we don't know what's going on. We don't fully know what's going on, but the support may start to manifest, and then we start to perhaps get our confidence. So at some stage we do feel confident, but our confidence might be misplaced. Just because we're making progress doesn't mean that we're making enough progress. And any feeling of complacency would, I think, be misplaced. And then finally we move to the top line, and the top line is really bad. It's the worst line one of the worst lines of a hexagram, and it's indicating that we try to take things too far. We get over complacent, and we become just a little bit blasé, and we risk destroying everything. And part of it is because we're not taking things seriously. We think it's all okay. We think we understand something, and we actually don't understand something. And we are completely out of our league. And the image that the I Ching gives is as a bird, its nest burning down. So, well, I suppose if we're talking about nests burning down, I suppose be careful with the electrics. Be careful with anything that could remotely be a fire risk. I'm not saying anything bad's going to happen. I'm just trying to look at things from the actual sort of worst possible scenario. But the reason this will happen is because we're complacent. We're taking something too lightly. So the I Ching is perhaps giving us some choice. So what we could do with this hexagram, the Wanderer, is we could just take things seriously all the way through. Do not be complacent. Never be complacent. Don't be ungrateful. Use all the support we have. If we make any progress, don't take that progress for advantage. Don't take that progress for granted. We could always lose our progress. So we could always lose what we've achieved. So if we're really, really cautious, we should be okay. And I think this is actually suggested by the next hexagram. So 56, the Wanderer, it moves to hexagram number 11, which is peace. Now, strangely, yesterday, the second hexagram, because yesterday we had possession in great measure, number 14, moved to 11, which is peace. Now we're getting peace again. So this indicates that things should be okay, that things should resolve. So the day might start off as being quite difficult, quite complicated. We don't really know what we're doing. But in the end, perhaps through our good sense and our caution, we can resolve things, and we can actually reach a stage where we are at peace, where things are also moving. Because this, Greg Wincook, he calls this hexagram flowing, that things are moving and that things are in the right place. So today is a bit of a challenge, but I think in the end we should be able to sort it out. And I want to finish by looking at the economy with particular reference to the United States. I suppose it's difficult to think about the global economy, and at this stage I'm really going to be quite speculative here. I'm not making any cast iron predictions about what the economy is going to be like during the Trump term. Not at all. But I just want to sort of create a framework for future discussions. And in the process, I will be going over stuff that I've already talked about. So if we're looking at the economy and what's going on, I suppose in the world at large, any starting point astrologically, with the economy has to be the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, because Jupiter and Saturn as a pair, they are in astrology the two chronocrators, the rulers of time, and so we need to look at the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, and this Jupiter-Saturn cycle is totally messed up. It's a really messed up cycle, and here is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December the 21st, 2020. And remember, there's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction every 20 years. And so this took place on December the 21st, 2020, 6:20 p.m. 6:20 p.m. London time, I think. So that would be a bit earlier US time. So this is a position of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. These are the positions of a planet. Remember, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened at 0 degrees Aquarius, and this happened just after Biden had won the 2020 election. Of course, it happened just before January the 6th. I wonder, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but maybe this whole Capitol Hill thing, I mean, forget the individuals here, but maybe there was a sense that this thing wasn't right. You know, I'm not into these stolen election stuff. I mean, I know some of you are, but I'm not into all this stolen election stuff. But at the same time, there may have been a sense in which it was a weird result. Maybe it was an unnatural result, perhaps, Biden winning that election. Because, you know, this Jupiter-Saturn cycle is so messed up. Now, let me tell you why it's messed up. The reason this Jupiter-Saturn cycle is messed up is because the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is the beginning of something new. I mean, it's a new era, if you like. So we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the beginning of the 1920s, and we can characterize the 20s, you know, like certainly from an American point of view, as the Roaring Twenties. You know, economic growth, which finally came to a halt at the end of that decade. Or you could say, you know, Reagan winning the 1980 election with that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Again, the very early 80s were a bit of a mess. There was recession, but Reaganomics finally worked, and the 80s were about Reagan and a particular approach to the markets. In the end, I suppose greed is good and all of that kind of thing, and that was how we characterized the 80s. Or, you know, the 1960s as a decade. There was a certain unity to the 1960s, certainly in terms of the West. You know, the 60s, the swinging 60s. But this cycle is just weird, and it's weird because, I mean, in a way, it's weird because the Democrats didn't win. I mean, because you'd expect some kind of uniformity around this decade, the decade that started in 2020, and for sure, I mean, okay, it's true that I predicted that Trump would win, but at the same time, I was very aware of this weirdness about it. That, in a way, it would have been more natural for Trump not to win. I mean, I think part of that weirdness may be that the Democrats were just playing too many games. You know, they kind of made Trump win. They made Trump the incumbent by talking about him so much that it was almost as if he was the president. So we have this messed up decade, but still, in terms of the economic cycle, we can see that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction represents the beginning. And in terms of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction cycle, you know, we have a conjunction. At the moment, it's always around a year ending in zero, around, you know, 2020, for example, 2021, or like in the 20s, early 20s, you have the conjunction. Then you have the opposition 10 years later. And the opposition is often when things go into crisis. So as you moved into the opposition at the late 20s, that's when you had the crash. In the 1980s, you know, in the end, things got difficult at the end of the 1980s as you moved into the Jupiter-Saturn opposition. In the 2000s, you know, things broke in 2007, 2008. They broke a little bit early. The Jupiter-Saturn opposition, by the time the Jupiter-Saturn opposition had happened, the great financial crisis had already occurred. So it's not an exact thing, but when you've got as you have now Jupiter square Saturn. Jupiter's now, you know, we've got Jupiter conjunction. There's Jupiter conjunct Saturn in 2020. So that first 10 years is, if you like, the upside of the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. It's when things are things are moving, things are growing, things are developing, and then you have the crisis at the opposition. So if you think about the Jupiter square Saturn, if you look at, say, the here's the inauguration of Trump. By the time, as I've said, I think he will be inaugurated. According to life tables, he's got about a 1% chance of dying between now and his inauguration. But I've done a horary. I think he will be inaugurated as president. But so as Trump becomes president, we're moving into the Jupiter square Saturn cycle. So Jupiter will soon go direct, and through 2025, Jupiter will make that square to Saturn. And in a way, this is a part of the cycle that is arguably maybe the most fortunate. When it's still growing, and okay, as that Jupiter-Saturn square becomes exact, there may be a bit of a wobble, but then you move into the Jupiter-Saturn trine, and that's when things really start to pick up. So we may already be seeing this. Trump may be a boom and bust president, and that bust may not happen actually during his term of office. So we've seen what's happened at the stock market since November the 5th. A lot of rich people are very happy that Trump has been elected. Of course, a lot of rich people are unhappy. It depends who you are, doesn't it? But the stock market has done very well. Things like Bitcoin has gone up hugely since the election, and so Trump sets himself up as a sort of a pro-business president, and maybe he's going to get away with it. Maybe we're going to actually see a Trump boom, and I think we should really consider that as a possibility. And I'm reminded of the 1920s, exactly 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, Warren Harding was elected in 1920. He died in office, and his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, became president. And here is Coolidge's inauguration on March 4th, 1925. Remember, in the 20s, the president was elected in November, but didn't actually become president until March. And I think they changed that that was the way it was always done in America. I think they switched over in the 40s. I don't know, but it switched over some time ago. So this was Calvin Coolidge's his second term, and this was when the Roaring Twenties were really about to get going, and here we had a Jupiter-Saturn sextile. So we'd had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. We had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the beginning of the decade, but here we have the sextile, and so it may well be that with Trump's inauguration, the decade is really going to start to establish itself, and certainly in terms of America, we may well see an economic boom, and this may see Trump all the way through to the next election. Now, in my previous two days ago, I talked about the danger of war. Now, I'm not saying this is all going to happen. It's all going to unfold. I think there is a danger of war because with Mars, with Uranus moving into Gemini as from 2026 onwards. So I'm not absolutely saying that this is absolutely going to happen, but I think it could happen. And so the question is, if we get this boom, when is it going to end? So I think it's a reasonable possibility, and I haven't looked at this from an astrological point of view, but if the economy works well, I think that it's very likely that Trump is going to win. Sorry, not Trump. The Republicans are going to win the 2028 election. And we might then be thinking, for example, of J.D. Vance's inauguration. This is potentially a chart for J.D. Vance's inauguration on January the 20th, 2029. I mean, if Trump's presidency goes to plan, goes to how he wants, you would have thought that Vance is a racing certainty to be president, to be the president following. And of course, this assumes that Trump doesn't decide after a couple of years to bow out. I mean, he could do. Then, of course, it would be Vance's re-inauguration. So this happens on January the 20th, 2029. And so we could then see Vance as being rather like Herbert Hoover. So Herbert Hoover was won the 1928 election, and of course, in 1928 everything was fine. The crash didn't happen until 1929. Until 1929, and interestingly, Herbert Hoover. There's Herbert Hoover's chart. Herbert Hoover was a Leo, born on August the 10th, 1874. And yeah, J.D. Vance was also a Leo, born on August the 2nd, 1984. I don't know if I got that right. So Herbert Hoover was born 1874, and so Vance was born almost exactly 110 years after Herbert Hoover. So we should perhaps consider Vance as being a Herbert Hoover figure, because Herbert Hoover, he got elected at the end of the Roaring Twenties, and there was a crash, and of course Roosevelt defeated him in 1932, in the 1932 election. And so the thing to be worried about, and the thing that perhaps Vance should be worried about if he is president, is the 2020. This is the first 2029 Jupiter-Saturn opposition. So the Jupiter-Saturn opposition is the first one is at December the 22nd, 2029. I think that is actually quite a powerful Jupiter-Saturn opposition because it happens just after the solstice. I mean, it's interesting that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was on December the 21st, around the time of the winter solstice, and the Jupiter-Saturn opposition on 2029 is also happening at the time of the solstice. And this may be the moment when the economy starts to really come to pieces. And so I'm not saying this is the case. So maybe the economy is going to collapse now. Maybe it is collapsing. Maybe it'll all be a disaster. That's what most people seem to think. The dollar's going to collapse, this and that. But I'm just trying to use astrology to suggest an alternative, that maybe the next 4 years until 2029 are going to be fine. And because they're going to be fine, Trump's presidency economically will go okay. And, as far as the Democrats are concerned, they've still got so much to work out that they're not going to be ready for power anyway by the time of the 2028 election. And so Jupiter-Saturn opposition, this may be when it all happens. We've got Jupiter-Saturn opposition in 2029, and I think we've got true retrograde motion. We'd see it again in 2030. So this could be the end of the boom. And so that means that if the economy starts to fall apart, then we perhaps need to be thinking about the 2032 election. And then if you take the view that history repeats itself, 1932 was when Roosevelt came into power, and 2032 is when the Democrats again going to come into power. And I do think that if you are a right-wing, libertarian, Austrian school kind of person, you might actually start to be quite worried about the 2032 election. Because if this really happens, the Democratic Party in 2032 is going to be very different from what it is now, I would guess. I've been talking about all this, all this woke stuff, this obsession with diversity and whatever. I've seen it said, so this is not my idea, other people have said this, that this is maybe connected with Neptune in Pisces. That through Neptune in Pisces, people have just gone on about wokeness and trans issues. Neptune in Pisces, there's just been no boundaries. People have just got completely caught in this. I don't know. I don't want to say anything too derogatory about it, but at the same time, I don't want to just say, "Oh, you know what I mean." That doesn't really tell us much, does it? But with Neptune in Pisces, sort of boundaries get dissolved. People start to think too much about other people. Maybe with Neptune in Pisces, if you've got a small group advocating for its rights, its imagined rights, then the collective decides that the rights of the small group are what really matters, and so everyone gets obsessed with not offending anyone, and anyone that does offend gets isolated by the collective. Neptune in Pisces, but with Neptune moving out of Pisces into Aries. And again, others have suggested this. I'm certainly not the first one. With Neptune moving into Aries, it's very likely that all this woke stuff is likely to dissipate. And so by 2032, we could be in a very different situation. And if the economy really collapses at the end of the decade, then the Democratic Party would probably represent. It probably would represent state could well represent a strong government, but not the woke stuff. It'll perhaps more focus on things like workers' rights, and at the moment that's not much of an issue, but it could become an issue. And one has to remember that Pluto is going to be in Aquarius. The FDR's the 1932 FDR government was, it was very interventionist. Roosevelt was in Aquarius. He came to power when Saturn was in Aquarius. It was a very Aquarian thing, and it was a time where state control was very popular, not just in America. I suppose Hitler came to power a couple of months before FDR came to power. FDR came to power on March 4th, 1933. Hitler came to power on January 30th, 1933, and this may be Pluto. This may be about Pluto in Aquarius. So perhaps Pluto in Aquarius, to an extent, may be delayed. So it's not the 2028 election we need to be thinking about. It's perhaps the 2032 election, when the Democratic Party could be very different, and perhaps we are going to start to see the consequences of a boom and bust under the Trump and perhaps Vance presidency. So these are just some thoughts about the economy. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm not saying that the economy is not going to collapse. We're going to get rampant inflation, whatever. But I'm saying just by looking at cycles, there seems to be an argument to say that actually we're going to be okay short term, or at least the people that matter are going to be okay. And we perhaps are not going to see a real falling out economically until the end of the decade with the Jupiter-Saturn opposition. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I will go into it in more detail. I'm sorry I was a bit vague, but I just wanted to sort of start to talk about the concepts, to sort of talk about the next 5, 6, 7 years, because I will be talking a lot more about it in future videos. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe, because it does make a big difference to this channel. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.